So I'm closing my Etsy shop. This is a decision that I've kind of had made for a while now. I just haven't actually pulled the trigger and made the decision and made it happen. So I guess that's kind of what this video is. For those who either have never seen me before this video or who are just relatively newer to my channel, then you probably don't know that when I first started this YouTube channel a couple years ago, I actually was posting a lot of videos about my small business journey and how I was trying to start a successful Etsy shop, and it went through many different iterations and it was about a 2-year journey, I'll say. So when I first started this channel, a lot of my videos were about that whole journey and that whole process. And so if you have not been around from the beginning, which I would bet most of you have not, you probably don't know that, but that is kind of how this whole thing started. So basically I started an Etsy shop a few years ago, and today I'm officially announcing that I will be closing it, and I'm going to share a lot of the things that I learned from that whole experience and why I'm quitting. It's going to be kind of juicy. I'm going to share a lot of things that I really do think are valuable to know, whether you want to start an Etsy shop or have had one for a while and just haven't seen success. I feel like I have a good amount of knowledge to share after my 2-year-ish journey on the platform. But before I dive into all of that, I'm just going to give a brief history of my Etsy shop and that little journey for those who don't know. So I opened my Etsy shop in July of 2022, and the name of that shop is Right Brain Rach. I had an Instagram with the same name long before that. I'd say that I was just kind of working on growing for exposure and awareness before I actually opened my Etsy shop. And the whole idea behind the name was just the whole right brain versus left brain thing. So if you're very left brain, then you're logical and I don't know what other words to use besides that. And then if you're right brain, you're very creative and artsy. So I technically opened my Etsy shop in July of 2022, but I didn't actually put any products on there for a very long time. It was kind of just I had to make myself open the shop so that I had it, and then I could kind of it would feel more real and I could start to actually put thought into products. So I didn't actually list any products on my shop until the following year in March. So March of 2023 is when I listed my very first products on my site. And I'm going to be so honest, I can't even remember off the top of my head what those were. I think they were color palettes for Procreate, because I still have those on my shop to this day. I think that's what they were, but I also can't remember. I'm did I do something before that? I honestly can't remember, but I feel like that's what they were. And then for the next few months after I first listed those products in March of 2023, I was very on and off in terms of my activity, I guess, how active I was on my shop, and kind of just how inspired and motivated I was feeling. I would be going up and down. So the motivation would come in waves over the next few months. And then a few months later in May of 2023, I gave my Etsy shop a bit of a makeover, which is kind of funny because it hadn't really been around for that long yet, but I think I was just feeling re-inspired and wanted to kind of start fresh with a little makeover. Then a month later, after I did that little makeover, is when I listed my digital portraits for the first time. So in June 2023, I listed those as available products on my shop. And I will say, I do remember going through many different iterations of those listings and offerings as well throughout the whole year or two that I had them on my Etsy shop. And that's just because Etsy is a little bit difficult in terms of made to order digital products, which that's a whole other rabbit hole that you really don't need to know about if you're just here to learn about why I'm quitting Etsy. But it was just hard for me to find a way to offer the different customizations and variations that I wanted to of these digital portraits based on like the options that you're given through Etsy. So I had a lot of different iterations of those listings throughout my time that I had them listed, because it was just hard to figure out what the best move was. And then interestingly, a week after I listed my digital portraits, I actually put out a video that was called like the struggles of starting a small business. And in that video, I was kind of just talking about like imposter syndrome and how it's hard to like feel like your products are worth the money that you feel like you deserve for them. And also in comparison to like other sellers on the platform, how they might be charging a lot less. And so then you feel like you shouldn't be charging so much, because it's like, is my work actually that good? But then you're trying to factor in how much time and effort you put into making the product. And that whole concept on like pricing and stuff is a very relevant concept to this video and the message that I will be sharing. So we will be revisiting that whole idea. Anyway, then after that, I started trying to use Pinterest as a way to kind of like raise awareness in addition to my Instagram. That didn't really go very far, but I tried it. And then a month later in July 2023 is when I officially like committed to the digital art niche, because I was trying a lot of different things. I had a lot of different ideas, some digital products, some physical products that I wanted to try. And I was starting to be concerned that my lack of a niche was why I wasn't growing and making many sales. So I finally decided to commit to the digital art niche in July of 2023. Then in August of 2023, I listed digital pet portraits. So the digital portraits I had listed before were just for like humans, I guess. And so a few months later, I listed portraits for pets as well. And then after I made these listings, I then tried like a little challenge for myself where I made a reel related to digital portraits and drawing digital portraits every single day for 30 days on my Instagram. And I actually made a little video about that, which was so long ago at this point. So I don't even know if I should recommend that you watch it, because I don't really remember how good it was. Probably not great, but I did make a video about it. And after all of that, I still didn't really get that much traffic or sales to my site. So fast forward a few more months, in November of 2023, I just took the leap and I launched physical products, which is kind of funny because I just said that earlier that year I had finally committed to the digital art niche. But like I said, I wasn't really seeing a lot of traffic or growth when I was doing that. And I had always wanted to try physical products. And so I finally took the leap and did that in November of 2023, which was a very scary thing for me to do for a lot of different reasons that, again, could be their whole own video. So I won't go into too much detail. But I think the scariest thing about something like that is just like the money that you have to put in upfront, which granted, I put in as little as possible because I didn't have a lot of money. I was a college student. So I really didn't put that much money up front. And I would say broke even by the end. Like I didn't lose any money by doing this, which is good. But it was a very scary step to take because you have to like buy the materials and everything to make the physical products before you know that you're going to sell any of them or make a single dime off of them. So it's definitely scary, especially when you're a broke college student. So after November 2023, when I listed those physical products for the first time, I made a few sales over the next several months. Some were from friends and family and some were from strangers. So that was very exciting. But pretty much after I listed my physical products, I wasn't super active on Etsy after that, like constantly creating new listings or anything. So I kind of just like slowed down in my activity on my shop. And I'd say like over the next year after that, I got an order every now and then and I would fulfill them when I did, obviously, but I wasn't like super active in releasing new products or new designs. And fast forward like a year to October 2024, I put my shop on vacation because I was moving and then I was getting married and then I was going on a honeymoon out of the country and then I was moving again across the entire country. And so I put my shop on vacation and I planned to come back in November because we were going to be settled here in Portland in the beginning of November. And so I planned to come back sometime that month. And then I just never did. And I have been inactive ever since. My shop has actually been on vacation ever since. And it is now September of 2025. So that is a very brief history of my Etsy shop journey, how it started, the different steps I took throughout and the different iterations it went through and the different products I offered, and now kind of where we're at right now. And during this time, I feel like I learned a lot. It's definitely been an experience that I don't regret in any way, but I do feel like I learned a lot. And I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about Etsy and the capabilities of having an Etsy shop that not a lot of people talk about. And I feel like I learned the hard way. When I say the hard way, again, I don't have any regrets. It wasn't like a horrible experience, but I had to learn for myself that a lot of these are misconceptions in my opinion. And that's kind of what I want to talk about before going into the specific reasons of why I'm quitting, because the misconceptions that I discovered myself through this experience obviously kind of play into that decision to quit. Now, before I get into all of these misconceptions about Etsy that I feel like are spread online that are not super accurate in my experience, I do just want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I feel like it'd be very easy for people to watch this video and then hear me say some negative things about Etsy and the platform and then just assume that I'm just like sour and I'm just like a sore loser and I'm like, I didn't succeed, it didn't work for me, so Etsy sucks, and like act like I'm trying to place all the blame on Etsy. I'm not. That is not my intention with this video. I can acknowledge like where my shortcomings were. I know the things that maybe I should have done better that might have led to more success, and I'll get into that. I just want to make it clear that I'm not trying to say that my failure at having an Etsy shop is because of Etsy and not anything I did or didn't do. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But I do think there are certain things that are said about Etsy and having Etsy shops online that just are not true, at least in my experience and in my opinion. And I want to kind of lay all of those things out for anyone else who might be in a similar position who's like, why isn't this working like everyone says it does online? Because I don't think that all of these things are necessarily true. So anyway, I don't know if any of that made sense, but basically I'm not trying to blame Etsy, the app, the platform, whatever, for the reason that my shop did not succeed. That's not my intention, but I do think that there are some things that are spread online about Etsy that are kind of just like used as almost like propaganda for why Etsy is like so great. And I don't think they're all necessarily true, at least not in everyone's experience. I hope I worded that okay and people don't try to like come after me and cancel me, because this is not meant to tear Etsy down. Misconception number 1 is it's a great source of passive income by just selling digital products. For starters, with this misconception is I truly do not believe that it could ever be fully passive income. Passive income basically means that you continue to make income on something that you no longer have to like upkeep, I guess. The reason that I do not feel that this is the case with Etsy is because I do think that Etsy kind of acts like all other social media platforms in which the algorithm favors active accounts. Now, I will say I don't have all the research on this. I have not done like a deep dive into how the Etsy algorithm works. And so if you want to learn more about that, I highly encourage you to go doing some research on your own, or maybe find other YouTube videos where they do a deep dive specifically into the Etsy algorithm. We do not have time for that in this video because I've got a lot to cover. But from my experience and from videos that I did watch during that time as I was trying to learn how I could like grow my Etsy shop and stuff, this does seem to be the consensus that the Etsy algorithm favors active shops. And the only way to really be active on your shop is to be making new listings regularly, because that's the only form of activity that your shop can really have. And so I think that even if you were to grind out like 100 listings and put them all up, and then your plan was to just kind of stop working on it after that and just kind of coast off the sales of all of that hard work and all those listings that you made, I think you could for a while, assuming that your Etsy shop is successful, but I don't think it would last forever. I think unless you're frequently creating new listings and being active on your shop, Etsy's algorithm will eventually stop caring about you and stop pushing people to your shop. And obviously take everything I say with a grain of salt, because 1, it's based on my own experience. 2, it's based on what I have seen other people say about their own experiences in my like research when I was going through this process. And 3, every shop is different. Maybe if you are one of those people that has 20,000 sales, maybe Etsy wouldn't ever stop prioritizing your shop, even if you stopped making so many listings, because you already have so many sales and you're already so successful. And so Etsy sees that as, this person is reliable, people like this person, I will consistently recommend this person. I can't speak to that, obviously. I didn't have a shop with 20,000 sales, but maybe this whole idea of like you need to remain active doesn't apply if you've gotten to that point, like that status on Etsy. I don't know for sure. Again, that's something you would have to kind of do more research on your own. But I do think if you are a little bit smaller and you haven't hit that like star status where you have thousands and thousands of successful successful purchases and happy customers, I don't think you could suddenly go inactive even if you have 50, 100 listings on your shop and still be pushed and prioritized by Etsy. If you want more information on this whole idea of like passive income on Etsy, there's one YouTuber I was like religiously following when I was like going through my own Etsy shop journey, because she was also going through an Etsy shop journey and she was sharing videos about it, and she was having more success than me, but even she was stating this concept that it will never truly be passive income. And that creator is Dina Liu. I'll link her channel down below if you want to go watch. I don't think she really does any Etsy videos anymore. I think she may have also closed her shop, but she did a lot of them for a while when she was doing her Etsy and like really trying to get it to grow. And she had a lot of really helpful insight in those videos. So if you do want like more details on that type of content and like that experience, I highly recommend her videos. Misconception number 2 is it's a great side hustle. And this kind of ties into the first one. As I've said, in my experience, in order to actually make decent income off of Etsy, not even a full-time income, just a decent like side income off of Etsy, you have to be so active. And in my experience, I think it is nearly impossible to be as active as you need to be while having another full-time job that is your full-time income and what you rely on to be able to pay your rent and take care of your family. Not to mention any extracurricular activities you have on top of that, having a social life on top of all of that. I think it is very difficult to be as active as you need to be on Etsy to keep that side hustle income coming in on top of all these other things, assuming especially that you have a full-time job and that this is just a side hustle. I think there are definitely much better and more effective side hustles out there, like all the like Uber food delivery apps and stuff like that. Like side hustles like that where you actually have the flexibility to do it when you need to do it and not do it when you don't have the time. I think those are like actually effective side hustles. Going into Etsy, even not with the intention of ever turning it into a full-time income and just doing it on the side as a little extra money, I do think that's very difficult to do. And like I said, that ties into point number 1, because I think you have to be very active on Etsy to be successful and to be regularly successful in making sales and making money. It would be a very difficult side hustle on top of all your other life commitments if you were constantly having to be very active to even make any money off of it. Misconception number 3 is anyone can do it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not true. I mean, I think if you really want to do it, you can do it, but I think there are a lot of things working against you, and that's kind of what I'm here to do, is kind of play devil's advocate. I think for one, the prior points that I've already made prove that it kind of takes a very specific person to be able to succeed at something like this. Ideally, I would say, like from my perspective of how hard you would need to work and how much time you would need to put into this, I feel like it would be ideally for someone who is single and so doesn't have a partner or a family to take care of or spend time with, which I don't know if that sounds really insensitive, but just like, I always joke that like I would love to be a bartender if I was single, because I don't want my evenings taken up by bartending and working when I have a husband waiting at home that I want to like hang out with after work. Like that's kind of the concept I'm going after here, is like if you're single and you don't have a partner that you like have to come home to spend time with after a full day's work at your 9 to 5, then like I could totally see chasing this dream as soon as you get home from work at 5 p.m., working until bedtime on your Etsy shop every day for years to like really get it going and be successful at it. Like that's definitely something you could do, but I'm kind of, from my perspective, don't see that as something anyone can do. I feel like if you are in a relationship, especially if you have kids, if you have a family, that's not really realistic or feasible, because you want to come home from your job and you want to spend time with your husband or spend time with your family, or you come home from your job and you have to do these things. You have to cook dinner for your family. You have to put your kids to bed, you know, things like that. So from my perspective, I don't necessarily feel like anyone can do it. I feel like it would take a very specific type of person, and also that person would need to want it badly enough to come home from work every single day and then work from the moment they get home till bedtime every single day on their Etsy shop for the foreseeable future. Aside from just the time commitment alone though, I do also feel like the marketplace is extremely oversaturated at this point. I think everyone wants to have a successful Etsy shop, either as a side hustle where where they can just earn a little bit of extra money, or they're trying to turn it into a full-time thing. So many people are trying that, especially post-COVID. I feel like Etsy shops and like the whole like at-home side hustle business thing really took off during COVID because people needed to find ways to make extra money and they needed to find things they could do for money from their homes. And so I feel like ever since that period of time, Etsy has been extremely oversaturated. And so I feel like unless you have like a revolutionary product to offer that's never been done before, it's going to be really hard to get your foot in the door and like get your shop out there because it's already so saturated and there are already so many successful Etsy shops doing just about anything and everything you can think of on there that it would be really hard to compete with them. Even if you niche down like crazy to help the algorithm really like nail down your target audience and help you reach the people that are most likely to purchase from you, even in that case, then it's like, well, why would they buy from you instead of these other Etsy shops who are already very successful in this niche? And especially, why would they buy from you if your competitors who are already very established and have thousands of sales are also selling products for cheaper than you might be? Again, we're going to talk about price later, but I do feel like that's a big thing, especially if someone has 20,000 sales on Etsy. They made those digital products so long ago, they've made so much money off of them. If they need to, they could lower the price by $1 or $2 for competition's sake because they've already made so much money off of it. It's not the same weight to lower the price as it is to someone who's just starting out and has put so much time and energy into these products that they would be like really lowballing themselves if they list it for such a low price. I just think it's really hard to compete with well-established shops on Etsy that are already successfully selling similar products for a really good price. And I'm basically just making the overgeneralized broad statement that every niche on Etsy is taken at this point. And obviously that is a very overgeneralized statement. I obviously have not looked into every niche that exists ever to confirm that. I also recognize that there could be new niches that are created by people that are not filled because no one thought to do it because it's a whole new thing. Like, I recognize that that is a possibility. I just think that at this point, Etsy is very oversaturated and it is very difficult to come up with something that is mostly or completely original and like get in the door in that niche. And even if you can find a niche that isn't too oversaturated yet, I think it's very hard to set yourself apart from anyone who is successful in that niche currently. And all that to say, I am now going to share the specific reasons why I am quitting. Those misconceptions that I feel like I heard time and time again in all of these videos of like, you can be successful on Etsy. Here's how you can do it. Here's what I did to make 6 figures in my first 3 months on Etsy, blah, 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 blah. Those are all the things that I feel like were hammered into my brain by those creators who were making those videos that I was watching so religiously when I was on this journey. And I feel like they are the main things that I just really feel like were misconceptions that did not seem to play out or prove true in my own experience. Granted, every person's experience will be different. Every person's success will be different based on the amount of work they can put in and their creativity and their products that they come up with. And that is a very important thing to keep in mind during all of this. But again, I'm just speaking from my personal experience. And so now for the juiciest part of the video, why am I quitting? As I've already said, a lot of the misconceptions that I just mentioned are definitely big contributors to this decision because I did go into this journey believing a lot of those things because of the videos I saw online and because of the experiences I heard from people. And so I went into this believing those things were true and kind of had to find out for myself that they are not always true. In the end, I really just felt like I was putting in so much time into this Etsy shop and not seeing results. I think if your goal is to grow your Etsy shop to be a really good, reliable source of extra like side hustle income or to even become your full-time income eventually, I think you will need help. I think it is just too much work for one person to handle if they have other commitments that just have to take priority over their Etsy shop, like providing for their family or paying for their rent. And just to kind of show how many steps it takes to just list one single product on Etsy, I'm just going to kind of walk through everything that one person would have to do all by themselves in their spare time to create one possibly successful listing on their Etsy shop. First, you have to have a good idea. And even before that, really, if you really want to be successful, you need to put in a lot of time to do market research to find a niche that you could even possibly compete in, and to find ways that you could stand out from every other person trying to compete in that niche. And that would take hours and hours and hours of market research before you even really do come up with that product idea from the beginning. Then you got to make the product. Whether you're doing a digital product or a physical product, both of those take forever. Then if you are creating made to order products where customers can customize and personalize products based on the different things that you allow them to customize, you need to make variations of those products to show these possible customizations. For example, one of my physical products I launched were wine glass charms, and I let people customize the color of their vinyl, the font of the letter that they were putting on there if they were doing like the initial ones, the color of the beads that went on the little ring around it. And so I needed to make different variations of those things for the product photos so that I could show these are the different things you could customize. Look, you could do it like this with white beads and pink vinyl and whatever, or you could do it like this with this cursive font, or like this with this sans serif font. And obviously you don't need to make every possible variation ever, because that would be impossible, but you need to make enough examples that you can convey the variety and like the limitless customizations to your potential customers, because that is a big selling point. Then you have to make the listing photos, and if you are selling physical products, you also then need to photograph those physical products, because those are obviously the main listing photos that you will be using. And these photos that you use for the listing on Etsy involve showing what the product is, obviously, showing all the different customizations that they can choose from if, again, you are doing made to order customizable products, how to use the product if that's applicable to whatever you're selling, photos that point to other listings that you offer in case there's like a similar overlap in those products that might confuse customers. For example, when I had my wine glass charms, I had wooden ones and I had acrylic ones, but because of how I had to list them on Etsy, just the easiest way to list those different variations, I had the same design for the wine glass charms, but two separate listings based on if they were wood or acrylic. So in my wooden one, I might reference the acrylic listing and say, if you want these, go to this listing. Then after all of this, you have to actually list the products, which might be surprising, but this process in itself takes forever as well. You have to upload the listing photos. You have to come up with a title for the product that obviously conveys what the product is, but then also optimizes the number of characters you're given for keywords and things that people will actually search on the Etsy platform. You have to write a description of the product that gives all the information that they might need, answers any questions before they have them and come to you with them, and also keeps in mind optimizing the characters for keyword search, because the words that you use in your description could also contribute to people finding you through what they search. Then there's the actual tags, which are different from the description and the title and are just more ways to include keywords that people might search to make sure they can find you. Then you have to create all the different variations, if there are any, for your product. So if you're selling a shirt, then you need to create the variations for them to choose what size they want and what color they want. If it's a made to order product like my wine glass charms, then you need to add the variation for choosing which letters go on which, if they're doing like the initial ones. You need to make one for the vinyl color, one for the bead color, one for the font of the letters. And sometimes between these variations, there might be a price difference. So you need to figure that out for yourself as well, if that applies to your products. And then you have to determine the price that you're going to charge for these products. And of course, you don't want to lowball yourself by charging way less than you're worth and not valuing your time and your artistic abilities fairly. But then you also don't want to overprice your products to the point where you're way more expensive than your competitors and no one's going to buy from you. And then after all of that, once you finally get your products listed, then you got to raise awareness for them so that people can actually find them and come buy them from you. And yes, I guess in an ideal world, if you wrote all your tags and your descriptions and your titles with the most perfect optimized keywords, then hopefully a lot of this would be done for you by the Etsy algorithm and by how people choose to search for the types of products that you're selling. But especially if you're just starting out, it's very unlikely that all of those things will add up and fall perfectly into place. So you will need to do your own advertising outside of the Etsy Etsy platform. And of course, this doesn't have to be social media, but I would say that's definitely the number one way that people advertise their products and the number one way that potential customers discover your products. And there's the catch right there. Social media marketing in itself is an entire job. There's a reason that big companies have full-time employees with a whole team behind them just to do social media management. Once again, in an ideal world, you need to post consistently on every single platform, basically. Ideally, every single day you need to be posting on these platforms. You need to make sure that every post is engaging so that people are liking it and interacting with it to help you with the algorithm and getting all the views and all the things. On Instagram specifically, you need to increase the number of reels you post in relation to like the still photos, because Instagram only really cares about reels at this point. So if you're only posting still photos on your Instagram, you're not going to grow nearly as much as if you're posting reels almost every single day. But of course, reels take a really long time to make, especially compared to just posting a single photo. Then you also want to be posting on your story multiple times a day to show that you're consistently active and to excite your followers and be like, look at what I'm working on. Look at how exciting this is going to be. Get them to really feel connected to you and loyal to you. And the way to do that is to make sure the content is very personal and it's not too similar to what you're already posting on your main feed, but it's not so different that people are like, why the heck are you posting this? You want to make sure you're staying up to date with the latest trends and hopping on them when you can. And most of what I just mentioned is all on Instagram because that's the only social media platform I really ever used. I tried TikTok every once in a while, but I just couldn't keep up with it. But every platform's different, and every platform that you are extremely consistent on is just another like tool in your arsenal to advertise your products. Another option to maybe like counteract all of these different things you'd have to focus on if you're advertising on your own, like through Instagram and stuff, is to pay for Etsy ads. And you could do this so that like your listing is like the first one that pops up at the very top when it like gets searched for. And maybe for some people that would be worth the money instead of having to worry about like promoting them all on their own social media platforms. But I think for a lot of people, this is just a cost that they can't justify because they're new to this business. They don't want to put in more money up front than they already have because they're not making money from it yet, or they're not making a lot of money. So I feel like paying for ads is hard for people to justify in the very beginning of their small business journey. And those are all the things you have to do on your own to have a successful Etsy shop. And that's just talking about the journey from like one product idea conception to getting it listed and advertising it. Like that's just for one single product. In my opinion, I think it is nearly impossible for one person to do all of those things consistently, all on their own and at the caliber that they would want to do them to represent their brand well without any help and without getting burnt out very quickly, even if it is their full-time job. Small business owners who do work their asses off like that in the beginning and end up turning it into their full-time job end up hiring on help because it's so much for one person to do on their own. They can't possibly sustain it that way, and they can only do it themselves for so long. However, I also think in a lot of cases, they aren't necessarily doing it all themselves from the very beginning. And that's not to say that it's not possible and there aren't people that did do it all themselves from the very beginning. That is definitely a thing. People definitely do that. All props to them. But I do think a lot of people who become successful had help from the beginning, maybe a family member or friend who was helping them on this journey so that they weren't doing every single thing all by themselves. And I'm not discrediting the grind in that case either. Even if you have a friend or family member helping, it is still a huge grind to get to a successful point. But any help counts, right? So having a friend or family member help is a lot of help compared to nothing and doing it all on your own. So all of that to say, if someone has turned this into a full-time job and is doing it full-time and they still can't do it all by themselves, how can you and I? How can we do it on the side of a full-time job that we work during the day because that's how we pay the bills? How can we do it on the side of caring for our family or ensuring we still have a social life or still being able to pursue hobbies? I think it is extremely difficult, dare I say damn near impossible. I kind of think of it as like the chicken or the egg debate, like which came first type thing. Like it's kind of just like a vicious cycle. It's like if I want to quit my full-time job to be able to run this Etsy shop and do my small business full time, then I need to grind to get it to that point. But I have to start off by doing it on the side of my full-time job because I need the money from my full-time job because Etsy isn't making it for me yet. But then there just doesn't seem to be enough time in the day for me to put into this Etsy shop to get it to where I need it to be. And so how could I ever possibly do that and get it to where I want it to be without just quitting my job to be able to have all the time to work on it? But then I can't just quit my job to be able to have all the time to work on it because I need the money from my job. And so it kind of just feels like this cycle that like never ends. Anyway, I think a lot of people who have found success in recent years on Etsy weren't afraid to take the leap during COVID when they had more time to do so. Either they just had more time or they kind of had a fire under their butt. Like, I need to make money somehow because maybe they lost their job or they weren't able to work as much because of COVID, which in itself is extremely difficult, obviously. And so I feel like that was kind of like the perfect time to take the leap and do it. And I think a lot of people did. And that's why it is so oversaturated now, several years post that time. But I do think that was kind of like the ideal time period to start. So one reason I'm quitting is I just don't feel like the results that I have gotten are worth the amount of time that I have put in. I do want to just point out that I used to put a lot more time in than I do now. Obviously, I mentioned at the start of this video that I put my shop on vacation almost a year ago now and have not touched it since. Obviously, I'm not saying, oh, I was putting so much time in the past year and I haven't seen any results. Like, I haven't put any time in since I went on vacation. I'm acknowledging that. But before that, I was putting a lot of time into it and I didn't feel like I was getting results that were paying off all the time that I was putting in. And at this point, I don't feel like I have the capacity to put more time into it without having to sacrifice time away from other things that I find more important to me, like this YouTube channel. I am much more excited about this YouTube channel and I have a lot more passion for it right now than I do for my Etsy shop, and having to put in more time in my Etsy shop because it's not finding success right now would mean taking time away from this YouTube channel, and that's something I just don't want to do. And so that is one of the main reasons that I have decided to quit and close my Etsy shop right now. But the other biggest reason, as I've been hinting at throughout this entire video, is the pricing. Because Etsy is so oversaturated now, even if you are able to come up with a really standout product that's super unique or like really stands out in quality based on your competitors, you are still at the end of the day competing on price. And most of the time, there is always someone more successful than you who is willing to sell their products for less. And so it will be very difficult for your products to sell. During my time on Etsy, as I've already said, I dipped my toes into digital products and physical products. So I feel like I have a good taste of both. And I think that this whole concept of competing on price is especially prevalent in the digital product space on Etsy. So I'm not necessarily speaking for every Etsy seller and every type of product you can possibly sell, but I do think in the digital product space, it is pretty much solely competitive on price. But again, keep in mind, I'm just speaking from my own personal experiences. Obviously, everyone is going to have a different experience selling on Etsy, but in my experience, this is what I have found to be true. Keep this in mind as I continue speaking on this topic. So stick with me here. I'm going to give an example of how you're always competing on price, specifically with digital products. I think a huge product market on Etsy is Canva templates. People will create templates on Canva that they then sell as digital download products. So you can go purchase this template from them, download it, and then put it into Canva and customize the entire template yourself. This is like a huge niche within the digital product space. So it's like within digital products being sold on Etsy, there's a group or a niche of Canva templates specifically. And then within the Canva templates niche, there's niches of like different purposes, like different Canva template digital product downloads for specific purposes or businesses. So let's say our Canva template that we are selling is digital downloads for bakeries. So we offer everything from menu designs that they can customize and print out to have in their store, from table cards that go on the tables and different artwork that they display in their store, all the way to social media graphics that they can post on their social media. And we basically just offer this massive like brand design kit. So it's kind of just like a one-stop shop, like everything that I need for marketing and promotional promotional materials is going to match by getting this brand kit. So I'll have social media graphics that will match the graphics on my website, that will match the actual physical menu and signs in my actual store. So obviously your niche is digital downloads for bakeries specifically, which I would say is a pretty good deep niche. Like you're specifically targeting bakeries. So there's going to be a lot less competition specifically within that versus like if you were just selling templates for menus, that could target bakeries, but it could target coffee shops, it could target restaurants, it could target bars, like literally anything that needs a template where they can list their products and then the prices next to it. That's what you would be targeting, but you are specifically targeting bakeries. So you already have a really good niche. Now, for simplicity's sake, let's say every other person in that niche that you are competing against is using clip arts and graphics that they found already created online to make their design. And maybe some of these graphics they found completely for free, or maybe some of them they've gotten through a website that they subscribe to monthly where they can get copyright free clip art images. This is usually the case with Canva because Canva has a million types of like built-in graphics that you can use in your products. A lot of these people are probably paying for Canva Premium, so they have a lot more options that they can use. But yeah, it's a lot of like pre-designed, pre-drawn graphics that you can just like slap on your template and you don't have to like worry about designing that part yourself. So let's say that these competitors are selling a design kit of 50 different graphics that you can download as digital templates on Canva. They've got signs for holiday specials and big sales and social media graphics and all the things we mentioned before. And they're selling this huge kit for $3. And so you're getting 50 promotional brand designed materials for $3 that you can customize till the end of time. That is very desirable. It's very cheap and very desirable. And so they're going to get sales. So a lot of these people are probably already very established in this niche. They've got thousands of sales. Now you are trying to enter into this niche. And here's how you're standing out. You create the same types of products, but all the graphics on all of your products are hand drawn by you. You spend the time to hand draw, hand paint, whatever, every single design that goes into these templates and these digital products that they can download. And as a result, every product is slightly different because they're all hand drawn by you. This makes your products very unique and special, and they would probably stand out a lot at first glance. It's something you could highlight in the title and description of these products and use it as a big selling point for like why your products are so beautiful and unique. But because it's all hand drawn, depending on the complexity of these designs and the products, it could have taken you twice as long to make, 4 times as long, 10 times as long as your competitors took to make their products. But if you charge a price that would fairly compensate you for the amount of time and effort you put into drawing these products, it is likely that you would not make a lot of sales and that you would not beat out your competitors very often because you're charging much more than them. What I'm trying to demonstrate with this example is that it seems that people have begun to prioritize the price of something over the quality when they are shopping on Etsy. While they may acknowledge that your hand-drawn products are prettier and more impressive, and maybe they even like them better, if they're way more expensive than the ones who didn't hand draw them and just used pre-made graphics online, they will likely still go for those just because they're so much cheaper. A specific example of this in my own experience is with my digital portraits that I listed on my Etsy shop. My digital portraits take me days to create. I am very detailed when I do them, and I put a lot of time and energy into them. And I truly believe that this shows when you look at them. I think that it looks like I put a lot of time and detail into them. And so I was listing them for $40, $50, $60, depending on how many people were in the portraits on my Etsy shop. And that was honestly like the low end. Like that was the cheapest I was willing to go. But honestly, when I was listing them, I was thinking this is not enough for how much time it takes me to make these. But I don't want to stand, like I'm already going so much more expensive than so many competitors on Etsy that I don't want to go higher, but it was kind of like the lowest I would let myself go. But if you go look up digital portraits on Etsy right now, you'll find some for as cheap as $10. And it was really hard for me at first to understand why people were charging so little and how they could possibly justify that. But after looking further and kind of like really digging into their products, I realized it's because they really do a lot less detail. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that anyone's products are inferior to mine if they do less detail in theirs. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I think it's probably something that they realized made the most sense for selling on Etsy. They realized that if they did less detail, they could finish them a lot faster and thus charge a lot less for them and become more competitive with their competitors based on price. And if you look closely, you can notice a big difference in the detail of the ones that they are offering versus the ones that I was offering. But at first glance, there's not too much of a difference. You really have to look and be like, oh yeah, there's a lot less detail in her hair, or there's a lot less detail in that dog's fur. But at first glance, this isn't something that customers really notice. And so I think most people are totally fine paying $10 for a less detailed portrait because they didn't even really notice from the start that it was that much less detailed. Or say maybe they did see mine next to a $10 portrait and they thought, oh, I do like hers better, but it's $50 more than this $10 one that also looks pretty good, so let me get this $10 one. Now again, I'm not saying that that was ever the case. I'm not saying that people saw mine and thought mine were better but didn't want to get it because of the price. I'm just trying to emphasize that price is like the main competing factor on Etsy, at least in my experience. I could go on and on, but I don't need to keep blabbing about that. I think I have illustrated that concept pretty well at this point. So basically, yes, my two main reasons for quitting were, one, I felt like the results I was getting were not worth the amount of time I was putting into my Etsy shop when I was my most active. And two, I felt like I was competing strictly on price with other sellers and pricing my products lower than I thought they deserved to be priced based on the amount of time and effort I was putting into them, just so that I could remain competitive with everyone else selling on Etsy. And even despite lowballing myself on a lot of those prices, I still was not winning out against my competitors. So what am I saying? What is the point of this video? I'm not saying that if Etsy is your dream, you should give it up and never try. That is not at all what I'm saying. At the end of the day, there is no harm in trying. I would hate for you to watch this video and be like, oh yeah, you know what? It doesn't sound like a good fit for me. And then 10 years later, be like, what if I had just tried? I would hate to be the reason that you don't. I just want you to know all of these things that I learned that going into it, I didn't know and I wish I had known. I think most people don't talk about these things online. I feel like surrounding Etsy, a lot of the conversation is like, yes, go do it. You can do it. Anyone can do it. Try. You have to just try. Just make it happen. And while that message is also great, I do think that there are things you need to be aware of going into it, like the things I mentioned in this video. And I think it's very helpful to go into it knowing these things. Now, if I had known these things ahead of time, I don't know if I would have still done it. Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know for sure. Obviously, I can't ever say, but I do feel like even if I had tried it anyway, maybe I wouldn't have kept up my efforts for so long, even when I wasn't seeing the results that I wanted. So I'm not trying to discourage you from trying if you want to try to start your own Etsy shop, but I would encourage you to explore all your other options first before just immediately jumping to Etsy. This is also something I did not do and did not consider, especially because I feel like a few years ago when I was first starting, Etsy was like the platform and nobody talked about any other options. I would encourage you to consider maybe even creating your own website to sell on instead of using a platform like Etsy. That way your main advertising is done on social media and you have control over it. And if someone comes across your page and sees the products you're offering and thinks, wow, I really like those, I want those, then you direct them to your personal website to purchase from. And when they go to that website, all the products they see are yours. They're not directed to Etsy where they're shown your products and then immediately under yours are shown products and listings from other competitors that are selling their products for way less. I think this method of having your own site that you sell all your products on and directing potential customers who fall in love with your Instagram account to that site to purchase, I think that would create much more loyal followers and customers. And as a result, they would likely be okay with paying a higher price because they're loyal to you and your designs and they value the time and work that you put into your products. Now, obviously you would have to pay for a website of your own. I think that's probably like a big motivating factor for why people like Etsy is because they don't have to pay for the site. They just make a shop and then they've got a selling platform without having to pay. However, you do have to pay at like 20 cents per listing that you have active like every few months, I think it is. And obviously that's not a lot of money at all, but it does add up. If you've got 100 listings that you're paying 20 cents for every few months, like that does add up. Plus, because you're using Etsy's site to sell your products without having to pay for your own site, they do take a cut of the money that you make when you sell a product. It's very small again, but still at the end of the day, that does add up. And so I do think it would be worth considering and looking into options to pay for your own website to sell your products on if you're looking into starting some sort of small business. It actually does not seem to be as much as you might think. I was looking very briefly before this video just to like get a good ballpark idea, and I found that on Squarespace, the cheapest plan is $16 a month, but you can get it for even cheaper if you pay like for the whole year up front. And I would bet that there are even cheaper options out there because I feel like Squarespace is a very popular one. So you might even be able to find some other sites that are less popular that are cheaper as a result. Now, is this what I'm doing? I have no idea. Not right now. In an ideal world, probably yes, but no, not right now. For now, I want to just take a step back and continue working on my YouTube channel. While I've always loved the idea of having a successful small business and selling products that I create all by myself and that I love and that truly feel like a representation of my mind and my artistic abilities, I've always loved that idea. But I've also always loved the idea of having a successful YouTube channel. I have so much passion for creating videos and for giving people a feeling when they watch my content. And right now, that's something that, one, I just feel more passionate about, and two, I feel like it's a lot more attainable for me. Honestly, I feel like I have so much more control over it. Obviously, the YouTube algorithm is a thing too, and it can be difficult to work with sometimes. And sometimes you really think you have a great video that just doesn't hit the algorithm the right way and it just doesn't pop off. And that can be frustrating. But overall, I feel like I have so much more control over my YouTube videos and my YouTube channel, because if I make a good video and I can title it properly and get it out there, like I know that I just have more confidence that like I made that video and that video is good and I titled it well so that people are finding it and they are also enjoying it and they also think it's good and they are subscribing to my channel as a result. Like, I just think it's easier. I have more control over it. Okay, that sounds bad. I'm not saying, oh, that's too hard. I don't want to do that because it's too hard. This is easy, so I'm going to do this. YouTube is not easy. Let me say that. It feels like I have more control over it. And I feel like I'm actually seeing results for my hard work. And I feel like I'm putting in hard work and it's turning into something. And I'm confident that my hard work can continue to turn into something on YouTube, whereas I did not feel that way about Etsy. Anyway, as I mentioned, if I wanted to continue working on my Etsy shop or small business in general, even if I took it off of Etsy and did something else, I would need to take time away from other things in my life like YouTube, and I just don't want to. I don't want to take time away from working on my YouTube channel right now when I have so much more passion and optimism for it than I currently do for a small business. So as of now, no, I will not be starting my own website to sell my products on, but I do encourage anyone who is thinking about joining Etsy or starting some sort of small business to look into that and consider it as an option. But for me personally, that is just not the path that I am taking right now. I think it's really hard to do something like this, like to admit that you failed at something, but also I don't see it that way. I don't see it as a failure. I just see it as a learning experience. Like, I learned a lot of these things that I didn't know about Etsy going into it. And I figured out for myself that in the future, if I ever wanted to try again, I wouldn't try Etsy. I would do it in a different way. And that's a valuable experience in itself. And so I don't see it as a failure. I just see it as an experience that I needed to learn that this is not the path I want to take for a potential small business in the future. So that is why I'm quitting Etsy. Those are all of the misconceptions that I feel like nobody really talks about online and that I wish I had known before going into it. I know I rambled for a really long time in this video, but I hope it was still helpful. But before we go, there's one more thing I want to touch on that I left for the end just because it's not actually like something I considered when making the decision to stop selling on Etsy and to close my shop. But it is something that I think is worth talking about because I think it's going to become a more prevalent issue possibly as time goes on and more people try to start selling on Etsy. And that is Etsy becoming another temu. Now, I'm not at all saying this is the case. I'm not at all saying that's what it is right now, but it is a very interesting conversation. I watched a video within the past few months from a creator that I absolutely love. Her name is Mia Maples. She is awesome. I'll link the video down below, but it was basically where she bought the same products from Etsy, Temu, and Amazon. And she was trying to compare them to see, are they all just using like the same inspiration for products, or are they selling the exact same products? And I thought that was very interesting because I personally think a lot of the products on Amazon and Temu come from the same places. Amazon is kind of just like a middleman to distribute the products and make it seem more ethical and whatever, but really they're getting them from similar places to somewhere like Temu or Shein, which is just like cutting out the middleman and selling directly to the consumer. But it was interesting to bring Etsy into that conversation because while Etsy definitely started as a very wholesome place for small business owners to sell their products, I think that like anything in life, honestly, this is why we can't have nice things. In that video, there were several products that did look extremely similar between all three. There were also several products that did not look similar, and it was pretty obvious that the Etsy seller was hand making them and that they were an original product. And then Amazon and Temu just had their own like cheap designs of something similar. But again, there were some that looked extremely similar across all three selling platforms. And I have heard of this concept that Etsy is starting to become a place where resellers will make shops and buy products for super cheap from sites like Alibaba, if you have heard of that, or AliExpress, sites where you can buy things for 99 cents. And then they will sell them on Etsy and market them as like either like a vintage find that they like found in a thrift store at like one of those like curated thrift shops or whatever, or they'll even claim like that they handmade it when they didn't. But making these claims, they can sell them for a much higher price than they bought them for and make a ton of money. This is a thing like all over. I mean, this is a thing everywhere, but I feel like it's becoming more of an issue on Etsy. And I feel like there's more conversation of like, is Etsy gonna do anything about this? Like, this is becoming a problem. I feel like it's still in the beginning stages of becoming a problem, but it's definitely a thing that is starting to happen and people are starting to pick up on it. And so that's definitely another negative to selling on a platform like Etsy is it is a third-party platform where anyone can just sign up and start selling stuff. And so you can't really control who you're competing with and the ethics and morals of the people that you are competing with, which again was not a factor in my decision at the time, but just something to consider moving forward if you are thinking about starting a shop somewhere, somehow, on some platform. All that to say, I think there are a lot of things to consider when you are thinking about starting an Etsy shop or starting a small business on any platform for that matter. I hope that this video was insightful and kind of gave you a different perspective on Etsy and starting a small business on there. Not necessarily as a way to discourage you from starting an Etsy shop. If that's something you've always wanted to do, I'm not in any way trying to discourage you from doing that. I just want you to kind of have all the different perspectives. I feel like there are a lot of videos out there that talk about all the positives of selling on Etsy and are very like rose-colored lenses, like anyone can do it. But I just want to give from my perspective the things that I learned and the things that I wish people would talk about more often in videos about Etsy and starting an Etsy shop, because I don't think it's fair to act like everyone can have the same experience and the same success. So that is my 2 cents on Etsy and having a small business. I am officially closing mine as of now. We will see where the future takes us, but for right now, I am just pouring all of my heart into this YouTube channel. I've been having a lot of fun with it and seeing a lot more reward for the amount of effort I've been putting in, and that just feels really good. So this is where I will continue to be putting all of my efforts for the foreseeable future. I hope you'll stick around. If you liked this video, please subscribe and stick around to see where my journey takes me, and I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon.